I don't need to tell you that Bama and Tennessee is a big game. I do need to tell you who needs a win more.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. SEC fans, this show be for you. It's an all SEC kind of day. Not going to be that way every show this week, of course, but Luke Robinson, Locked On Alabama, joining me here because there are just so many storylines in the SEC right now, including but not limited to Alabama's problems against Vanderbilt didn't look like a one-off because they showed up again against South Carolina, Luke. Blown coverages, turnovers from Jalen Milroe. I think he is forcing and just trying to do too many things on the football field when he doesn't need to, and it's leading to a lot of problems. But here's why I think Bama needs a win more than Tennessee. The first reason is that the schedule is far more favorable for the team in Knoxville than the team in Tuscaloosa going forward. If Bama loses this game, I think they are probably out of the SEC and of the college football playoff picture because I don't think they go undefeated the rest of the way necessarily. And reason number two is Jalen Milroe is a veteran quarterback, and Kalen DeBoer has not continued the success that he showed against Georgia. And I've got Nico Iamaleava on the other side for Tennessee, and I didn't have huge expectations for the Vols compared to some of their fans. So that's my reasoning. How crazy am I?
I don't think you're crazy. Look, it's hard to say. We're still all navigating this new playoff world, so it's hard to say who's really in, who's really going to be out. And I think you would have had a better feel for it if this were just a four-team thing. Yeah, Alabama would be out with this second loss. There's no doubt about it. With the second loss, I don't think either one of these teams is necessarily out. It's going to be a tough game. It always is. What's going to be interesting is Kalen DeBoer will be going into Knoxville, and that place will be raucous. It won't be at night, which is a positive. But so it may not be as crazy as it was against Florida. The stadium was reverberating. I could feel it through the TV. But when you think about places Kalen DeBoer's been in his coaching tenure, now I don't know all of them, but I know I'd probably say I'd venture to guess Oregon's probably the most intimidating place he's been, and Tennessee's going to have double that number of fans with the same type of attitude and more Tennessee whiskey. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit different. Good news is a lot of these Alabama players have been in that environment before and been in environments like that before, and maybe not necessarily Knoxville, but I mean, Auburn was pretty crazy last year with Jalen Milroe having to lead a comeback. Kalen DeBoer is also really, really good when it comes to big games. He has shown a propensity to play down to the competition sometimes. His teams have, at least. And so I think that this game is big for both of them because I'm going to tell you something. If Tennessee were to lose this at home and you couple that with the loss against Arkansas on the road, and then you say, okay, well, they've also still got to play Georgia at Georgia, and they still have to play Vanderbilt. I don't care where you play them. It's going to be tough. I mean, Vandy's kind of tough right now. It feels weird saying it, but it's true. And I think both fan bases will take a loss very, very hard.
I agree with that, and either fan base is going to come down on the head coach because that's where everything starts, whoever loses this football game. I just feel like with Milroe having a year under his belt, the expectations, at least for me, are higher in Tuscaloosa, even though Kalen DeBoer is in his first year, and I don't expect him to win the SEC or win the national championship, but I expect him to be a playoff team with the talent they have on their roster and the schedule they do have. But I just look at their schedule going forward, and before the year, Luke, I picked them to go to LSU and lose, and that's why I say their playoff hopes are on the line, because after watching Ole Miss lose that game a week ago, I'm not wavering off of that prediction right now, because I really like LSU, and I think they're playing much improved football from the start of the year. And you look at the rest of the Tennessee schedule, if they lose this game, their playoff hopes will come down to the Georgia game, because I don't think anybody will lose 3 games and get into the playoff this year. Like you said, we don't know for sure, But at the very least, Alabama's still got, Oklahoma's not that good. Missouri's not great, but not terrible. But they've still got the Iron Bowl, of course, where crazy things can happen. And that's part of the reason I say, yeah, Bama needs this more than Tennessee. Both teams want it a lot, of course, but I think Bama needs it more.
Well, relative to national expectations, I think Tennessee folks would beg to differ, because they would say, hey, 2 weeks ago they had penciled themselves in to the college football playoffs. I mean, they felt like they were headed to Atlanta. I mean, even if they lost to Georgia or Alabama, they felt like, okay, we're in. They didn't foresee a loss to Arkansas coming. They didn't see themselves sputtering against a very hurting Florida team that, unbelievably, if they don't lose Graham Mertz, they probably beat Tennessee.
They could.
And so I see exactly what you're saying. I think on a national level, the perception will be that Alabama needs this win more. And I don't want to steer this away necessarily from Alabama talk, but you talk about LSU. Hey, look, LSU needed everything in the world to go right to be able to beat an Ole Miss team that was missing a player or two themselves. And they need a lot of fourth down conversions. And I'm giving them credit. I mean, I don't want to take away from it because it's a big deal to do that. And Nussmeier played fantastically towards the end. But there were some things, a missed field goal in there. There were some other red zone opportunities that Ole Miss just sort of flubbed away. Now, you could say LSU made that happen. You could also say Lane Kiffin sort of made it happen himself. But I think that LSU certainly has its own set of problems too, and their loss coming to a Southern Cal team that now just can't get themselves straight. No team has had as much success in Baton Rouge as Alabama has. And sometimes that includes LSU. So I'm not saying it's a definite win or a definite loss. I'm just saying don't strike it up as either one of them just yet. But I feel like this is going to be an interesting game because there's some Alabama folks noticing some trends when it comes to this particular team. Very ill-timed penalties. A penalty is never good, but it's especially not good when it's right before the half. South Carolina finally gets on the board. Alabama gets the ball, and they get some dumb personal foul penalty that sets them back at the 12.5 instead of the 25. And the plan was, hey, we're going to go try and get a field goal ourselves. And you throw a pass that ends up being intentional grounding, and it was just a bad thing, all the bad mojo all the way around. There's some moments in the game where Alabama could have taken over that South Carolina game. The second possession, Alabama had Ryan Williams wide open for a touchdown. I say wide open by Ryan Williams standards. It would have clearly been a touchdown if Jalen Milroe could have hit him. But you're right. You said something earlier. Jalen Milroe appears to be forcing some things. I think that's a great way to put it. And I think if he just lets the game come to him a little more, quit trying to be a Michael Penix or whatever, just go do your thing. You're one of the best athletes in the country, period. Yeah, I don't care if people call you a running back who throws the ball. You're the best running back that throws the ball in the country if you do it right. And another thing that Jimmy and I talked about on the Locked On Bama podcast was, the defense is catching a lot of head, catching a lot of flack. And I get it. This defense does not make anybody remember Alabama 2011 or 1992. I understand.
No, it does not.
Yeah, but let me tell you where the defense is getting a bad rap because the offense isn't helping them. Alabama's more of a quick strike team right now. That's what Kalen DeBoer is known for. They had quick strikes against Georgia even. That's what they do. They've had quick strikes all year, right? Well, they hadn't been getting as many quick strikes here recently. And when you miss things like Ryan Williams being wide open, it would have given you a 14-0 lead. All of a sudden, you probably take the air out of South Carolina pretty good. And then the defense can pin its ears back a little bit more. And then they don't have as much pressure on them. When you build the defense needs the offense to do its thing a little more and give them a little more of a cushion instead of this all being on the defense's back. So I'm not ready to just – I've said some things on Twitter about Kane Womack. I might wish I'd take back later, but in the heat of the moment, you're just trying to be interactive on social media. But I think the offense does need to help the defense out a little bit more if you're not going to control the ball, then you need to be the quick strike offense and score points with it. It doesn't do you any good if you're a quick offense and you don't score and the defense comes right back out there.
Yeah, one thing I'm really interested in this game. Well, two things. First of all, which team is going to play to their full potential if either one? Because we saw the glimpses earlier this season, but in the last couple weeks, These teams have just come down. And usually, with a couple of good head coaches like you have here, you tend to have your play elevate as the year goes on. But these two teams have started to take steps down from the pedestals we put them on earlier this year. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is either one of these teams going to figure out how to run the ball? Because Tennessee's offense doesn't move when they don't run the football. And Alabama hasn't been able to run the football a lot either. And I think that is part of the reason so much onus is put on Jalen Milroe by himself. Why he's looking at the game going, oh my gosh, I have to make this incredible play. I have to force the ball and throw an interception before the half and, get a safety in a situation where I should just throw the football away or check it down over the middle. Like, I think whichever team figures out how to run the ball ends up winning the game. Luke Robinson, Locked On Alabama. Luke, appreciate the time as always.
Appreciate you, man.
LSU, boy, you better not overlook that LSU team. We'll tell you why next. Hey, Locked On College Football fans, time to recognize the Roy Player of the Week. For me, it's Garrett Nussmeier. Oh my goodness, was he good. Attempts over 51 passes, throws a couple of interceptions, but finds a way to bounce back and with some fourth down conversions, wins the game for LSU late in the game in the fourth quarter and overtime with a game-winning touchdown to Kyron Lacey. So, this season, we've pooled over $10,000 to support players on Roy. Micro deposits lead to massive change. With the Roy app, you can direct your support to the athletes you love, ensuring all funds go to the specific player that you choose. And unlike collectives, you know exactly where your support is going, and you even receive exclusive content like personal videos and updates after the season. Plus, don't miss out on Roy's exciting giveaway. Win 2 tickets to a game in November. Just download Roy, create an account, enter referral code LOCKEDON, and you're entered. Just like that. Already on Roy, any contribution to an athlete's campaign also gets you entered automatically. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Check out Roy on social media on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Roy_return on you for more info. Roy, support the players, change the game. You best watch out for LSU. They don't usually sneak up on people in the SEC, but they might be sneaking up on some folks right now. The man with the silkiest voice at this network, Matt Moscona, Locked On LSU, joining me here on the show. Matt, what did you make of that game? Because my takeaway was, wait, if Garrett Nussmeier cannot play his best football till the fourth quarter and you still beat a really good Ole Miss team, who can't you beat?
That's a good question. I think the bigger storyline is actually the other side of the ball. Remember, it was this game a year ago where LSU allowed 55 points and 700 yards, which was a record for, of shame, of infamy for LSU defensively. But I think what's maybe most impressive is when they had to get stops, they did. I mean, 6 sacks, 9 TFLs, 11 passes defended, 2 forced fumbles, an interception. That's probably what this team is defensively. Like, they're not great defensively, but they're opportunistic and they can create havoc, which creates some negative plays. If the defense can play like that, the offense is good enough to score on anybody. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Spencer. Like, they're capable of beating anybody. But the flip side is also, and if you're Ole Miss and you woke up Sunday, you're thinking, how did we lose that game?
Man.
So the point being that if you're LSU, yeah, you're capable of beating anybody, but you're just as capable of going to lose to Arkansas this weekend.
Yeah, and Arkansas, ask Tennessee how easy of a place that is to play. I think the Razorbacks are a pretty good team. Like, they've got 2 losses on the year, and they should only have 1. In one of their losses, they went on the road and put up over 600 yards of offense, and much like Ole Miss in this game, to your point, Matt, woke up the next day going, did we lose that football game? Like, how did that happen? And I think Sam Pittman's team has proved a lot of people wrong. I think the upset meter, the emotional letdown factor is 100% in play for LSU in this matchup. But one of the reasons that I like the Tigers more and more, and when they lost week 1 to USC, Matt, my takeaway on the show at the time was, look, this stings if you're LSU, but Nussmeier is that guy. He is ready, and if you figure out a couple other things, I think they'll be all right. They've got a tough schedule coming down the stretch, but one reason that I'm not going to look at LSU and focus on the shortcomings is because Garrett Nussmeier, I am just bullish on how good that guy is. He makes the biggest throws in the biggest moments, and it seems like that's when he's playing his best football.
Yeah, man. He's starting to pop up in a lot of mock drafts as a first-round pick, too.
And he should.
I asked Brian Kelly on Monday about the touchdown pass at the end of regulation that tied it. Because think about this, Spencer. That wasn't like 2nd and 10 in the first quarter. That was 4th and 5 with 30 seconds to go. You don't get 5 yards, the game is over. He didn't just dial up a check down to get 5 yards and keep the sticks moving, keep the game alive. He went to his third progression and threw Aaron Anderson open. By the way, Aaron Anderson, who was bracketed in double coverage, and if you go watch the end zone shot, Garrett threw to a spot. He was not throwing to it wasn't like, hey, dude's open, waving his hands in the end zone. I mean, that's not exactly a high percentage play, but he's fearless. He's got what I kind of call athletic arrogance. You know what I mean? Like he's got the arm, he knows it. And so sometimes he'll make those, he'll challenge himself and others. But he's been awesome, man, on an LSU team that has surprisingly struggled to run the football. They have made up for it because he's been that good, man. And he struggled in the first half. My goodness, he made up for it in the second half of that ball game. He was great.
Yeah, a big win, and LSU has not lost an SEC game, by the way, but they start with Arkansas this week, then they go at Texas A&M before they have a bye to come back home and host Alabama. Then it's at Florida, host Vandy, and host Oklahoma. I feel pretty good about LSU in those last 3 games, but it's the next 3, Matt, where you go, boy, yeah. That's kind of a gauntlet there. It's a show me what you're made of. It's show me. Was Ole Miss just you finding some home field magic at Death Valley at night with a couple of good plays and you needed a couple 4th down conversions, and Ole Miss was probably the better team for 3.9 quarters of this football game, and yet LSU won? Is it going to be that, or is it going to be, hey, LSU is actually that good of a football team? I think 2-1 in the next 3 games is a really good outcome for LSU and gives them a chance to control their own destiny to get to probably the SEC championship game, but also the college football playoff.
Really? SEC? You think a 2? Well, I guess they're 2-1. They'd be a 1-loss SEC team, so that could make sense. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, if they go 2-1 in the next 3, I agree with you. I think they'll win their last 3 games. But you know what's interesting about the next 3? Bama might feel the least scary, maybe because it's at home, but also because of how they're playing. You know, one thing about this Arkansas game, and I don't know how many people outside of these 2 fan bases really understand this, but it's a weird paradigm. Arkansas fans view LSU as like a fierce rival. LSU doesn't really care about this game. So it's one of those things where you're always going to get Arkansas's best, and Arkansas's always played this game in what has been a pretty natural letdown spot for LSU, which happens again. Go look at this series. Go back to Arkansas coming in the league. There's 2 times where LSU has gone to Fayetteville and just run the Hogs out of the building. Once was in like 96. The other was 2016 where they won 38-10. That was a miserable Arkansas team. But even bad Arkansas teams give LSU problem. And I agree with you, Spencer. I think this is a good Arkansas team. So, yes, this Saturday, I think, is kind of terrifying because it is 100% a letdown spot after an emotional win. You got to go on the road against a team that's coming off a bye, who views you as a rival, who had a week to get healthy and game plan for you. This is a really, really sticky spot for LSU.
Yeah, and they're only favored by a field goal, Matt. So Vegas knows, you're not going to go in here and just get out and roll. Quick glance at that game in Fayetteville. What's the number one thing LSU has to do to walk out with a win?
Forced turnovers. I don't know if Taylor Green's going to play. So you mentioned earlier Arkansas should have won one of those games. We're talking about Oklahoma State.
Yeah, against Oklahoma State.
Remember the A&M game? Like, if
could have won,
protect the football, they should have beaten A&M in Arlington, but they never beat A&M in Arlington for that reason. But Taylor Green's been really good this year, but his inability to protect the football, and then LSU has been really good, as we just talked about creating havoc and getting takeaways. So if LSU goes to Arkansas, wins the turnover battle, I think they'll win the football game. But that's the one to watch. The other part of that too, Spencer, is watch Taylor Green. He injured his knee at the end of the Tennessee game. Remember, he didn't finish that game. Sam Pittman said on Monday that they think he's going to go, but he's day to day. If he's limited, I mean, a big part of Taylor Green's game is his athleticism, his ability to create with his feet. If he's not available or limited, that really changes the total dynamic of this game as well.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, they have designed quarterback runs in that offense. Bobby Petrino, a lot of success with running quarterbacks in the past. It's one of the reasons Arkansas, I think, has taken off this year. And, I didn't see that much of a change from KJ Jefferson to Taylor Green. Neither one's a phenomenal passer. They're big guys, capable runners. But to Bobby Petrino's credit, that's clearly the right move because the Golden Knights in the Big 12 are struggling right now, a little bit of a letdown team, and Arkansas is one of the most surprising teams in all of college football right now. So should be a really, really fun football game. And boy, Arkansas at home off a bye. You could just say that out loud, and that should be enough to scare lots of people out there.
Also, as a fan, Arkansas is the worst trip in the SEC. Arkansas and Florida, the two worst. The armpit and the butt crack of the SEC. Take the pick. It's Arkansas and it's Gainesville. They're the worst.
The smooth tones of Matt Moscona, Locked On LSU. Matt, appreciate it.
Okay, man.
Is Georgia ready for Texas? Yes, but no. That's coming up next. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. And that's America's #1 sportsbook, so that's a pretty good entity to be checking out. Do you want to bet college football? FanDuel's got everything that you could possibly want because they've got point spreads, they've got totals, they've got over-unders, they've got money line. I mean, anything that you want for college football. If you just want to learn more about the sport, go over there and check them out. And if you're an NFL fan, yeah, they've got that too. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Guaranteed. Don't even have to be right. Just place your first $5 bet, get $200 in bonus bets. It's that easy. Go check out America's #1 sportsbook at FanDuel.com. Is Georgia ready for Texas? I feel good about one side of the ball, and oddly enough, that side of the ball is not the defense. Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC, joining me. Look, I still like Georgia. I still see the potential there, and haven't gotten around to making a pick on this game yet because it's still early in the week, but Texas has flipped to being the favorite, according to our friends at FanDuel, Chris, because Texas has been the more impressive team so far this season. And I said going into Red River last week, Texas's defense is the most underrated unit in the entire country. I think they showed that against Oklahoma. I think the Georgia offense has found its groove, but how concerned are you with the Bulldogs defense?
Yeah, it's a little concerning. It's funny. Their sack numbers kind of came down a little bit last year, and it was kind of unusual for Georgia. But they've always kind of been that team that is top 5, top 10 in points given up, per game. They're always, it's all you always look up and it's like Georgia only allows 7 points a game or 9 points a game. Well, this year that's Texas, and Georgia's given up about 17.5 a game, and that's got them, I think, 20th in the country. But it's like, I don't know, 6th or 7th or 8th in the SEC. So it's funny, like they're way down there. But I think you just look at the schedules and say, look, Georgia's played a much tougher schedule. They've played Clemson, who gets better week by week, looks like one of the best teams in the country. Then they had to go into the belly of the beast in Alabama, in Tuscaloosa on a Saturday night. And regardless of what's happened with Alabama since that game, that was a tough place to play. And so I think they've played some of the toughest, some tough opponents so far, whereas I think Texas hasn't really been tested yet. I mean, I want to give credit to this Texas defense. And yes, the numbers all say fantastic, but who have they really played? I mean, they beat Michigan in Michigan when Michigan was like, we don't even know who our quarterback is. We're trying to figure out everything. We lost 35 people to the draft. Like, it's, again, good win. Don't want to discredit it, but it's not like Michigan had a juggernaut of an offense. Same thing with Oklahoma this past weekend. Oklahoma is in an identity crisis. They don't know who their quarterback is. They can't get anything going on offense. So Texas has done what they needed to do, but this by far is going to be the best offense that they have seen, and particularly best quarterback they've seen so far this year in Carson Beck. And that's where I think this is a true test on a week where they just lost one of their safeties, Derek Williams, for the season. Like, Texas, I'm a little worried for their secondary facing Carson Beck.
I agree this is the best offense they've faced by far. I don't think that's a particularly hot take per se when you look at the schedule. I do push back on the who have they played narrative, because if you have a really good defense, Chris, when you do play the schedule that Texas has gone up against, what more could you ask for? Like, if Georgia had played Texas's schedule, how different would those defensive results be? I look at the way the Longhorns have played on that side of the football, and I love what they do in the trenches. I'm with you that the secondary is more of a concern, but that's, relative to the rest of the team. But I think that front four for the Longhorns, I think it's nasty.
Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, they're getting after it, and they're doing their thing, and obviously some big recruiting wins the last couple seasons that are really producing. Anthony Hill, if you remember, he was down to A&M in Texas, and it was a real battle between the two, and he ends up at Texas. And look,
how good is that game going to be last week of the regular season? If trends continue, Gordy, that could be. Oh, boy.
I still think even if A&M loses 2-3 games, they're still going to treat that like their Super Bowl. They're going to put everything they have in to try to beat in Texas. But Colin Simmons was a big win for them. He was a big 5-star D lineman that was torn between LSU and Texas, chose Texas, and he's having a monumental freshman season for them so far. So, I really like the pieces they have up front with Texas. But again, they can only play who's on their schedule. But let's keep in mind, when they were the SEC office was divvying up schedules, Oklahoma got the brunt of it. Texas's schedule yes, they have Georgia this week, but they don't get Bama. They don't get LSU. They don't get Ole Miss. They don't get Tennessee. They don't get Mizzou. They got the easier side of the SEC schedule, and that's where I say, great, you beat Mississippi State and you beat Oklahoma, who's a rival. You were going to have to play them anyway, but let's see what you do against some of the better offenses. And I even heard Kirk Herbstreit said, keep an eye on that game 2 weeks from now when they have to go to Vandy. This is a much different Vandy team. Diego Pavia, the way he's playing, you didn't think Texas, when you looked at your schedule, that the trip to Vandy might be a tough one. But no, this Georgia team is going to give Texas the toughest test yet this season.
When I look at Georgia's game against Mississippi State last week, was not as close to me as the final score indicated. And Georgia got up big. Mississippi State, to their credit, they're starting to find some things on offense, perhaps with Jeff Lebby in his first year. Nobody had big expectations for the Bulldogs this season. But, hey, they played a really strong second half. They put up 21 points against Georgia. And look, did it mean anything at the end of the day? Was it ever a serious upset threat? No. The difference, Chris, and why I just have a question or two or three about this Georgia defense is Kirby Smart's defenses didn't used to allow that. Like, even though you can say, the points didn't really mean a ton, they didn't used to allow those. It used to look more like Clemson in week one. And I just wonder what's going on. Of course, there's the noise around or outside the Georgia program with the off-field incidents. I don't know if that's seeping into the locker room. I don't know if it's a personnel thing. I don't know if it's a coaching thing. I don't know. I don't know what to make of Georgia on the defensive side.
Well, they've had injuries. Michael Williams is a big force that has not been out there. He's been fighting injuries, and when they get him back out there, that's gonna be a difference maker. But I would counter and say also Texas's offense, I'm still a little bit concerned for. I thought Quinn Ewers was good, not great. Had the early interception, which I predicted he was going to have a pick against Oklahoma because he did it twice last year. Got that out of his system early, and it didn't cost him the game. But the run game is really. Like, they're really missing Cedric Baxter. When he went down at the start of the season, I said, that's not great. I like Jaden Blue, but Blue's not been great running the football as of late. He had some fumbles a couple weeks ago. He only averaged 3 yards a carry this past week. Trey Wisner emerged, and he had some really nice runs, and he was really, to me, the best player in the game offensively for Texas. But you got very fortunate with Silas Bolden running down a ball that was fumbled into the end zone, fell on it, recovered it for a touchdown. If Oklahoma falls on that, the game kind of shifts last week. So, again, not trying to knock Texas's offense, but I'm just trying to make a point. It's not like they're clicking on all cylinders, scoring 55 points a game a week. Like, they still are not a complete product, and Quinn Ewers had to shake off the rust a little bit. Let's see what he does. Advantage at home. If this game was at Georgia, I'd be fully on board the Georgia bandwagon saying they're absolutely going to win this one. I think Texas has a lot going in their favor here, but I also think if they're not careful and they turn the ball over, that Georgia team is going to smell blood in the water, and they're going to come for that victory.
I think the Bulldogs offense has been clicking ever since the second half of the Alabama game. I think they have found something, and that's understandable because they've had a lot of new pieces to work into the offense this year, for Carson Beck to figure out, hey, where am I looking on third down? Am I just reading the defense, or am I looking at this guy, or where's the chemistry, where's the timing? It looks to me, Chris, like Georgia is playing on that side of the ball in a way that doesn't make me question their ability to do enough to win this game in Austin.
Yeah, I like their receivers. I like Aaron Smith, Dylan Bell, Dominic Lovett. They've all kind of emerged. Oscar Delp's a nice tight end option. I like their pass catching weapons. The big one to watch, though, is running back. Trevor Etienne's been okay so far, but they have been dinged up behind him. And Branson Robinson got hurt last week. We don't know the severity of the injury. Nate Frazier, the freshman, he's had some nice moments here and there. Obviously, week 1 against Clemson had a big run, but I kind of look at that as an example of, that we're so used to Georgia just handing the ball off 40 times and just crushing, running down people's throat, 220, 240 yards. And we haven't seen a lot of that from Georgia yet this year. Now, again, they've thrown it a lot more with Carson Beck, and he just had a career high in passing yards, 459 yards. So, again, if this is a game where they think they can just put the ball in the hands of Carson Beck and let him throw wild, then maybe that's what they got to do. But just keep an eye on that Georgia run game. If they cannot run it effectively against Texas, it may spell trouble.
Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC. Chris, appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Spencer.
Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and until then, hope you have a most wonderful rest of your day.